Other board members from the Michigan Barn Preservation Network with us, so I'd like to introduce them as well. One of them you know reasonably well, our President Emeritus, Stier. Our Chief Photographer over here behind the camera, Jim Mulvaney. And if you were involved in any of the restoration work for this, you may have met this gentleman, Richard Harvey, who is also here as well. And last but certainly not least, because she got here by the hair of her chinny chin chin, the Vice President of the Michigan Barn Preservation Network, Julie Avery. Over the past 25 years, only 90 Michigan barns have been designated Barn of the Year. The Leelanau barn becomes number 91. Michigan's iconic barns, historic symbols of our state's great agricultural past, are disappearing at an alarming rate. As you here have found, with few incentives to maintain and restore historic barns, little public awareness of the importance of preserving these irreplaceable and very culturally significant artifacts, the history of our rural heritage is at risk of being lost and forgotten. The Barn of the Year seeks to capture the public's attention by recognizing barns that have been saved and inspire others to become barn stewards. Each year for the last quarter century, our search process highlights again how rich we are in proud barns that survive and thrive. We are rich in barns and so rich in barn stories. Every barn has a story. This year has again revealed exceptional barns with fascinating stories. Stories of tradition, of family, determination, rugged work ethic, diversity, and in this case, care for our fellow man. People do love their barns. And so I guess there's the good news and the bad news that I have just talked about. One is, the bad news is that many of these are disappearing and will never be saved, and their stories unfortunately go with them. The good news, as I pointed out, in the last 25 years, we've recognized 90, now 91 barns that have been saved and are alive and thriving. All surviving barns are worthy of recognition, we feel, but only a limited number each year are selected to be awarded Barn of the Year. This year, 11 barns across Michigan were nominated. 5 were chosen for the honor. Our distinguished panel of judges carefully considered the uniqueness of the barn and its story, the degree to which efforts were made to preserve and maintain the barn, how creative and thorough was the work that went into the preservation effort, and of course, visual appeal. The history of the Leelanau County Poor Farm and the role it played in the first half of the last century is certainly now well known in this community. Had it not been, however, for the tenacity and perseverance of a select few people, most of whom are assembled here today, that story would likely have faded into oblivion. For this barn, which is the subject of our attention today, would surely have fallen to a demolition crew, and along with it, most likely the story that it represents. Instead, this barn, the remaining visible symbol of a significant historic presence in your community, stands today and will stand for future generations due to the efforts of this small group, the Leelanau County Historic Preservation Society. This week, the latest edition of the Michigan Barn Preservation Network newsletter, the spring edition, came out and featured very prominently on page 2 is the Poor Farm Barn and its story. And I want to just briefly maybe quote from that before I finish. As with many county governments at the turn of the century, Leelanau County established a farm in 1901 to house residents who could not care for themselves and to provide them the opportunity to engage in meaningful work, both agricultural and domestic. These farms became known as poor farms in reference to the social status of their residents. The Leelanau County Poor Farm operated for more than 60 years, ending in the mid-60s. The Poor Farm Barn, which is now the sole survivor of the 120-acre farm and its several buildings, was built in 1911. Its survival, however, was never assured, and after 60 years of neglect following the closing of the farm, the county published a call in 2017 for bids to demolish and remove the barn. That move by the county also stimulated a move by interested residents to object to the proposed course of action and instead to call for efforts to repair and find uses for this barn. Eventually, a nonprofit community and educational organization, the Leelanau County Historic Preservation Society, was formed, and after substantial negotiations, it was granted a 25-year lease to save the barn and provide for its future use. Today, the Poor Farm Barn stands ready to fulfill its new role as a symbol of both our culture's social history and the area's important agricultural heritage. It sits as a lone sentinel to recall how the community responded in times of dire need. The Miles Kimberly Recreation Park in which the barn sits draws visitors during the season for educational and civic events. It once again has become an asset to Leelanau County and an exceptional preservation story. So it is with great thanks that we recognize the Historic Preservation Society and its work to preserve the Poor Farm Barn. We are pleased and proud to present this Barn of the Year Award for 2021 to its representative, that is the person who worked so hard to nominate the barn, Laurel Jeris, and its president, Stier. If you'd come forward, please. We're pleased to present this plaque, Michigan Barn Preservation Network Barn of the Year Award 2021, nonprofit adaptive use, the Leelanau County Historic Preservation Society, the Poor Farm Barn. And just so it's not just them who get to see the award, here's a nice 2 by 4 foot sign to attach to the side of the barn.